This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is New Jersey's own Jaron Gulino. He brings the East Coast attitude and energy to the stage and to his music. He began playing bass at the age of 15. Through the early years, he cut his teeth playing thrash and death metal, touring the DIY style. While fronting his own band On Top, stepping into Philly favorites Mach 22, he achieved just about everything possible at the local and regional level before taking the next logical step forward. Touring gigs with the Australian rock band Dellacoma would eventually lead to Jaron joining the post-grunge rock band Tantric. During his tenure with the band, he managed to consistently juggle multiple projects and bands, most notably performing with the 80s rock band Heaven's Edge and teaming up with Stone Sour's Josh Rand in the L.I.F.E project. After 6 years of heavy touring, chart-topping success, and multiple releases with Tantric, Gullino found a home with the legendary guitarist George Lynch in Lynch Mob. Jaron is featured on over 25 original releases, including the latest Heaven's Edge comeback record, Get It Right, as well as Lynch Mob's 2023 album, Babylon. It's a pleasure to have you on, Jaron.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's so great. You know, I just recently, just for the audience sake, I just recently met you at a Judas Priest concert in New Jersey. I had the pleasure of standing next to you and your dad. And I was just blown away when you sent me your bio, and a lot of the people that I was talking to that night, they were just going on and on about you. So thank you so much for having time to fit me into your busy schedule.
Of course. When you mentioned, you had a show, I figured that was a sign that we needed to do it.
Yes. Signs are all around. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't really know much about the younger Jaron. So what were you like as a little boy? I know, everyone says you're from New Jersey, but what was that life like as a young child?
A lot of playing outside and hanging out with the older neighbors and being easily influenced by some of the older kids. Everything from music to riding bikes and looking for action. I was kind of always geared more towards maybe not causing mischief, but just digging up dirt where you shouldn't be and making bike ramps and getting hurt and all the fun boy stuff when you're a kid. But at home I had a lot of musical exposure. My dad is a huge rock fan. I mean, as you met him at the Priest concert, he's been a lifelong diehard since, their first record hit, and he could import it over to the States before it was even really out here. And he's been a large influence in my musical journey and career as well. So, yeah, I mean, growing up with Deep Purple and Rainbow and bands that he could kind of make fun for a young kid, and, growing into that and becoming old enough to be exposed to other people that played music, whether it would be friends or older kids and, acquaintances, even things like coming out of my early years. I was a skateboard kid when I was younger. And I feel like being exposed to the skateboard world was a big step musically for me as well, because a lot of their content, like the videos and the VHSs we used to get, they had a killer soundtrack. And that's how I would find bands that were kind of outside of my normal, radar. And through skateboarding, I met friends that played music and learned about new music. And it's funny just how it ended up, me being obsessed with that crossed into me being obsessed with playing an instrument and becoming a musician. And that was, I would say, the bulk of my childhood was raising hell as a skateboarder, and then taking that energy and putting that into playing music. And I try to just get all that aggression out and that energy out on stage. And it's just kind of become my new physical happy place.
Yeah, well, it's so funny how you mentioned the skateboard, because when I was growing up, we were doing the bicycles, but as an adult, 3 years ago, somehow I got obsessed with this idea that I should learn how to do the skateboard. I was starting to learn to ride a motorcycle and I was being daredevil and I broke my wrist on the skateboard. So literally
Ah,
every time I see one, I have like, oh no. So I think sometimes when you get to be an older person, skateboard should be left for the kids. Yeah, wow,
yeah, that's
that's
kind of where I
great.
leave it now.
Yes, you
Yeah,
cannot afford to have anything happen to your magical hands. Yeah, definitely no. But it's interesting you
that's my only
mentioned.
reasoning.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure. But you mentioned your dad. Was it just you, or how many siblings did you have?
I have a sister that's 2.5 years younger, and then I have a brother 10 years younger, my half brother, and they're not into the same music that me and my dad bonded over. But they were around it, and they're supportive of me, of course, and they come see the shows. But in terms of that bond, that was something that pretty much it was just me and my dad. I mean, we've gone to shows since I was 10 or 11 years old. And actually, the first concert I ever went to was with him. It was Iron Maiden with Queensryche and Halford at the Art Center, 2000, 2001, something like that. And, that's why going to Priest was especially, it was my first concert ever seeing Halford and then now the latest thing. So, it's weird how things come full circle with that.
Yes, yeah, really amazing. Well, first of all, that brings back a lot of memories for me, but it's also interesting because you're very lucky that your parent was actually interested in the music that you're interested in, because sometimes kids are in it, there's a generational gap, so
Sure.
they don't want to play certain music, or they're not really into the Beatles. They want to do more, heavy metal things, and it just wasn't their influence. So yeah, I could see how your dad was interested. Did you try any other instruments before, picking up a guitar, or expressing like wanting to know more about the bass?
I think when I was much younger, maybe even 9 or 10, I expressed interest in learning the guitar. And I found that being left alone with it in my room was a little, I don't know, intimidating, you could say. And I kind of just traded that in for going full force with skateboarding at an early age. But it wasn't really until I saw friends of mine in my early teens playing, music and instruments at school, or there was this place called the School of Rock where I grew up, and we would go over there to skateboard, on the property, and then I would see like friends from school in there. They're doing like Slayer songs and like playing King Diamond songs, and it's like all these bands that I was interested in, but never really thought about being able to play that kind of music. And that was like what really sparked my curiosity. And it was the heavy and being able to perform, that kind of physically demanding music, I think is what really drove me in. Because though now I'm older and I like a bunch of different things and different styles of music, I think the aggressiveness of metal, and at the time I was super into thrash and a little bit of death metal. And I think that at the right age kind of just hit it right at the same time. And I was able to put that energy and that physical aspect of going fast and being on a skateboard into my hands and doing that on a bass. And I think it was just the perfect blend there. And my dad had a bass around the house. He played a little bit with his friends, back in the day when he was younger, but never was really able to take it any further than that. And I think having that bass at the house kind of just was like the perfect thing. I didn't have a guitar, I didn't have drums, so who's to say whether I would have fell into those? But I think bass has been a blessing because everyone always needs a bass player. It's a little different with a singer or guitar player where you have a more specific identity. But it's been a great thing and a great journey, and I'm very lucky to have had that influence early on.
Oh, absolutely. So you mentioned the School of Rock. Did you ever attend, or you guys were just kind of hanging around the School of Rock?
When I first started, I did attend. I want to say I was there anywhere from maybe 3 to, I don't even know, about 6 months. I pretty much would tell my teacher when I would go in there, like, I just want to play with a pick. And he'd be like, well, most bass players play with their fingers, but there's no right or wrong way. And so let's learn scales. I'm like, I don't want to learn scales. Teach me Anthrax, teach me a Slayer song. And once I could physically work my hands together and kind of get, on the same wavelength, then I kind of just put the lessons and the School of Rock aside as far as the learning experience. And I used it more as a networking. I still would go and hang out there with all my friends. Some of the teachers there were young and they were very experienced. And so we would try to make music with them and, feel like we were cool hanging out with a good guitar player, whatever. And we actually ended up using the School of Rock as a venue, and we would rent it out. My very first band, it was called Trasher, and we would have killer metal shows there, and it would just be kids stage diving and circle pitting, and it was the craziest little scene we had going on there for a while. And that slowly became more of a thing. But the School of Rock, it was vital in my everything as far as music goes, but not for most of the same reasons that a lot of people would say. A lot of people went through their whole program and graduated when they were 18 and got to jam with some really famous people on their all-star program. And I have a lot of friends that did that, and I read more and more these days of people coming up in the scene that have also done that and come from that. And I think it was an amazing place and an amazing organization to really revamp the music scene for young kids. And I'm grateful for it. And I think there's really no endless way to use that tool. I think even just as a meeting place or a social gathering, let alone an institution or a learning place, that's just an incredible tool for kids these days.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, like renting it out as a venue, because that's part of being a performer is getting used to being in front of a crowd and also being able to manage the stage, especially in that environment. I mean, I went to a lot of heavy metal clubs growing up in the 80s, and, the crowd loses control. Sometimes the crowd gets involved with the stage and, the security guards and all of that. So it's so neat that you had that chance to do it locally. And it's such a young age, just to be able to say, okay, I'm making my dream come true. And that's part of like what I often talk about called manifestation, where you like manifest something. You walk on stage and you play. So do you remember walking out on one of your first School of Rock performances, with maybe lights or maybe just how many kids showed up? Do you remember that feeling it gave you?
I do, and I was scared crapless. I would go to these school. They had these things like the Dare program would come into school, and they would have like a talent show or whatever. And I just remember this kid being up there who was older than me in a higher grade and just playing these drums like a total pro. I mean, just going nuts. And I'm thinking, I would love to do that. And then I just remember being up there on another day of school when there was nobody in the room and standing on that stage thinking, I would be terrified up here to be having to play in front of all these people and do something that, like a performance. It's like any kid in school trying to give a speech. They're always nervous about talking or presenting in class. It's kind of like that. But, once we started doing it on our own, and it wasn't like this is a program you have to follow and here are the rules. Like once I was able to do it with my own band and set the stage up the way that I thought was cool or whatever, I think it just made it way less intimidating as far as performing and way more powerful in terms of what you're presenting. And, I've always been a big believer in, doing something that you can get behind and believe in. I don't want to just play music. I don't want to play in a cover band and play songs I don't care about. I only want to be a part of something and a band and a presentation and something more than just playing the instrument. And I think that was kind of those early days at School of Rock and putting on my own shows. That was the breeding ground for the nucleus of what I always wanted it to be about. And another big part that came with that was the business side, setting up the event and scheduling it and promoting it and then collecting the money and paying bands. And, I've taken that all the way to today. I tour manage and handle a lot of things. I book shows. I help promote for all sorts of bands, not just my own. And I look at that as almost like an internship at my first job. It's just learning the ins and outs of what would come and then using that experience for the next 20 years, pretty much.
Yeah, that's really neat. When I was reading in your bio, it seems like you started playing at 15, but it also seems like you started to venture outside of New Jersey. So when did you start, getting like an opportunity to be on the road? How old were you? Like, take us on your timeline because, if you were a teenager, you had to have buy-in by your parents or, something like that, right?
So it's funny. I was telling a close childhood buddy of mine the other day, just kind of about my upbringing and how we got to this place. And my mom, who I lived with mainly, my parents were separated. She, single mom raising me and my sister was a little hellraiser. And I was too, but for like innocent, stupid crap like skateboarding, and she would have this rule. She's like, yeah, you can go out to concerts, you can go away, stay up all night, do whatever you want, as long as you do your homework and keep your grades up. Like, that's all that mattered. And somehow I was just able to do that. So with bands, it was like we would go out and play. We'd be playing in clubs when we were underage. And I think like 17 going on 18 was when we really first started going into I was living in Pennsylvania just outside of Philly. So we would cross the bridge. We would play in the city. We would play Jersey. We even maybe did New York here and there, just little weekend things with bands. And then it became like the following year, my 18, 19 is when we started using MySpace to do show trades with bands in other cities. And we would say, hey, we're coming through Atlanta. If you could hook us up with a show, we'll gladly give you a show here in Philly when you come. And we booked about 4 or 5, like 2 to 4 week tours that way. Obviously you're doing it for the fun and the love of it, and you want to make gas money, but that was like the extent. You just went and hope people came. And sometimes you're playing a house party, sometimes you're playing in a warehouse in the desert in Texas, and it looks shady, and it ends up being the craziest, most fun time you've ever had. And I met a lot of cool people and came up with a lot of crazy bands that would go on to be much bigger bands later in life. But that was a huge learning experience at a young age. And I think that came right as I graduated high school. So yes, we were on the weekends going up to Massachusetts and stuff while I was still in school. But once I had graduated is when we started doing the long trips on our own, using MapQuest, trying to find places with printed out directions before GPSs. And we actually had a kid that was 2 years younger than us in the band. It was like the singer was 1 year older, and then the 2 other guys were younger. And this kid would be like 15 and just go on tour with us and like tell his mom like that's what he's doing, and call school and let them know he wasn't going to be there for 2 weeks. And I don't know how we got away with that for so long, but it was really some of the best times. And, the first taste of long drives and sleeping in the van. And, I can honestly say I've done it all, and I've started from the ground level and maybe even below in the gutter, and come a long way. And I'm just always open to the adventure. And I think those early years are what really, paved that way for us. But my mom, I think early on and my dad were like, okay, it's time to go to college. What are you going to do? And I was like, oh, I'll go locally. I'll do a community college because I'm focused on music. But of course, that can't really be a career, and really pay off unless you're famous. And I'm not getting famous. I'm a bass player, And I ended up finishing college and still doing music as much as I could. But the touring kind of subsided for a while because I was working a regular job and had relationships and didn't really have the opportunities until a little bit further down the line. And in my 20s is when things started to, snowball in the right direction. But I wasn't really on tour and making money as far as a job until, past my mid-20s, my late 20s. So I think staying with it all those years and remembering, all that work and the struggle that you put into something, and, you just got to let it grow and let it bloom, and it'll become something. But I feel like the second people want to give up is the second that it's all going to break, and I'm lucky
so
to.
True. That is so true. Yeah. Just circling back for a second, you mentioned going to college. So when you say local community college, where did you go?
I went to Delaware County Community College out in Pennsylvania, and I went for business and got my associates with that. And at that point, I was really trying hard with music and really putting everything into it. And I also had a long-term relationship, and I don't know. I just always tasted something more, and I would just do everything I could with what I had. And then getting all the business education and materials kind of beneath me, that started to work in my favor. I was starting to learn how to deal with more of the business side and work deals with promoters, or budget accordingly. It's like people don't really think about all the things that go into making it happen. And I think the other part of that is you got to be willing to invest in yourself. I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars I pumped into my early bands, just wanting to be noticed or recognized or on the radar with everybody else out there that I thought was cool. It's an endless money pit, but that's what it takes. You have to do it. Somebody has to do it. And I always believed that no one was going to do it for me and that I had to do it myself. Took a long time, but, finally making some progress, I think, now.
Oh, yeah. But
And
I want to give you some credit, though, because you were young, and when
sure.
you look back, even you're still young, I could say that easily. But when you look back on those early days and you say you have to invest in yourself and you have a business mind, it's quite obvious. I mean, you talked about having a business mind when you were 15. I mean, you did things that were what we would call out of the box. Most 15-year-olds are not thinking of creating a traveling band or swapping out with other states. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal to think that you had a young mind doing all of this, which is great. But on top
Sure.
of it, though, is knowing, I need to be practical and I need to have something to fall back on and following through, saying I will go to the college and I will continue to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, knowing that you knew that what is really going to make you happy. And as much as these things were making you happy, you knew that you had a big piece of your music in your heart. And you knew that you had to keep going or pushing that to the limit to basically say, like, that's actually probably going to make me the happiest. So I think that piece of it, I give a lot of credit to you for that because you really push that, following your heart, literally by that word intents and purpose of saying you had to see where it came from. So I come from a world of demo tapes, right? So was it a demo tape? Like, how did you say it was my mid-20s, like when I finally felt like I got myself in the right direction with this? So how did that become of it?
Well, I could say early on when I first started, yeah, the demo tape was everything for me too. And honestly, I found so many great bands through their demo tapes or at that point CDs. But yeah, like I always believed in you got to have like almost evidence of your work in a way. It's like, yeah, a million people could have a demo tape, and by the time those copies end and vanish into people's basements or whatever, it doesn't exist anymore unless it's technically on the internet or an official release. And so I always tried to find ways early on to be a part of something like that. So whether it was a compilation from a record label, like one song, or putting out an album even through an independent label just to get it exposure, those were all things I believed in, and producing something for all these years of work. I try to always produce and put out music and progress in that way. But it wasn't until maybe mid-20s where I realized that's a lot harder than people think that it is. It's not about just putting out a great song and okay, if it's great, people are going to like it and hear it and it's going to grow. That's not always true. Some of the best musicians and best bands don't make it because they just don't get put in front of the right people, or they don't have the resources or whatever. And I think after a few bands that I had been in and just pushed and invested in, I realized that maybe the opportunity isn't so much getting your band big, but maybe it's being a part of something bigger than that outside of that. And that's when I started to do a lot of fill-in gigs and helping out other bands when they needed it. Original bands always, but ones that I thought were cool or worth doing, not just for the sake of the opportunity, but for the pleasure of playing with other people that I thought were cool, and experiencing that. And that's kind of what began to lead into kind of getting in Tantric. And in my bio, I mentioned this band Dellacoma, and they were an Australian band that was at Rocklahoma one year playing with my band Mach 22. And we all connected and did some show trades and had them come to the East Coast. And, they asked me to fill in for them one year for a couple shows, and they were all buddies. So, of course, I said yes. Upon some other bands, I did Charm City Devil. They did the same thing. Got recognized on Facebook by the singer John Allen, and he asked me to help him out. And that was a great experience and, a step upward. And at the time, Dellacoma were kind of like the same place as Mach 22, not necessarily a higher ranked band in terms of what kind of rooms we were playing, but it was an opportunity to maybe learn a different style of playing, or just bond with friends, really. And because of that, I got asked to help them later on, a few years down the line, when I would be put in a band with some bigger name guys. It was Dellacoma with all substitute guys. I was the bass player. Troy Patrick Farrell was the drummer, and he's played with many bands. And Chris Green from Taiketo was in the band as well. And yeah, after that run and connecting with those guys, it led to being asked, hey, Troy was in Tantric. He said, hey, I'm doing this band called Tantric. I just kind of got in it and they don't have a lineup. Would you be interested in being the bass player and coming out for a run of shows? And that led, to kind of just steamrolling all these different opportunities together. And the Dellacoma thing is the way to that. And that wasn't my band. And I didn't really have anything to do with it other than just being at the right place at the right time. And, very grateful for that opportunity. And I don't think I'd be nearly anywhere near where I am, now without that.
Yeah, well, you said a lot there, and I really appreciate it because it gives us kind of the history on you. But to play something like Rocklahoma, I guess you said you played that, right? I mean, it's probably one of the bigger venues, right? I mean, that was probably playing for more people than you were probably used to at that point, correct?
That was the biggest event, especially because it was one of those that I read about online and always would see on Blabbermouth and see all the cool lineups of bands playing. Like, oh, I would love to go to that someday. Like, for me, all my like goals and dreams as a musician were all based on, I would love to go to a country one day and see a concert. I would love to go to Rocklahoma. I would love to go on the Monsters of Rock cruise. I would love to see these events. I never really thought about I'd love to play them. It just like seemed like it was something too far fetched to even think about. So yes, early on with Mach 22 being able to do an event like Rocklahoma, we were on the smaller stage, but we still played to a lot of people and had a lot of fun and met some famous people. And, that was just a taste further into what, you kind of always hope to kind of experience as a young kid in the scene. I feel like, I don't know, I say this all the time. I feel like I'm a young man in an old man's game in terms of, the genre and the style of music that I prefer and play. And, it's kind of true. It's like I'm a little late to the party here, but, I think new blood is what everything needs. And, a taste of young bands at a big festival like that can be exactly what it takes to keep these kinds of things going, because where else do you find out about bands you've never heard of? You're not looking them up because you don't even know they exist.
That's so true. I would have to say that I think that you're a young man with an old soul, because as you're talking, I mean, just the music, but not just the music, the business sense and the professionalism and all this. It's like you've been here before. I believe in all that, but you're definitely like an old soul because you're talking about this so naturally. Even though you said you were thinking and dreaming of these places, that's kind of what I talked about earlier, but the manifestation. So as you enter Tantric, tell me the timeline. What year were you entering Tantric? Because I was listening to Tantric in 2004. So were you involved at that point?
I was not involved until 2017.
Oh, okay.
Much
all right.
further.
Okay.
I came in July of 2017. Pretty much I got asked 3 days before a 6-week tour was about to kick off. And they said, hey, I think it was Friday night. And the tour, I would have had to leave by Monday for this tour that started in Seattle. So, I traveled a little bit. I'd never been out to Seattle or anything like that. But the offer pretty much was, hey, we need a bass player. Do you think you could learn 14 songs for a headline set and leave by Monday for a 6-week tour? And, yeah, I was like totally up for the challenge. It was like I had heard of the band. Once I started to listen to the music and review to learn the songs, I realized, I've heard maybe Breakdown before. I might have heard, one or two other songs. Couldn't remember them. And it was totally outside my genre because kind of like you're saying earlier, I'm an old soul. I like a lot of old music. I kind of die off at the late 80s, early 90s with some of the stuff. And it just wasn't really in that headspace or in that scene, when Tantric came out. So I wasn't really aware, but I knew it was going to be a great opportunity. And what I always wanted to do was be on tour and be in a real touring band. And I thought even for 6 weeks, I'll go out and network and meet people and try to connect. And the catch was I had to tell my full-time desk job. I was in sales, in corporate sales. I had to tell them, hey, I got this opportunity, and they knew I was a musician, but I hadn't been touring. So I said, hey, I got to go on this tour. And so they were like, yeah, really supportive, really cool. They said, yeah, just when you're ready to come back, just let us know, your seat will be here. We'll kind of let you go do this thing. And ended up going and never coming back. It was just met the guys pretty much the day of the first show and winged it. And, of course, I'm sure it was rougher than I remember, but, we got through it fine. And 6 weeks later, we're talking about, the next leg starting in a few weeks and, are we going to do this? And I knew that it felt right. And I knew that the things that I've always kind of been hoping for and pushing for, whether it was the band I loved or not at the start, doing it, I knew that the opportunity was there for me and that, this is what it's going to take to do that and to someday be in that position. And, I did 6 years with Tantric and, it was a roller coaster for sure. But, again, I looked at it as an entry level, opportunity to, on the national scale to step up one more thing from where I had been and, learn the ropes. And I quickly found out what it took to be a tour manager and how to be thrown into the fire and be in, all sorts of situations and keep the wheels moving, and,
Well, you
that
couldn't
was
have picked a better band. Tantric is one of my favorites. I mean, I could probably recite all of their lyrics to you, so I'm a
Sure.
big fan. But the funny part about it, as you're talking about it, so casually, I have to say, Jaron, I swear to God, it's just like amazing the way you talk. Like it's just so easy for you. Like, oh, I'm going to take 14 songs and learn them by Monday. Like I would be having a panic. I would be pacing around the room. I would be. So when you look at that music, for the rest of us that are not musicians, when you look at that music and you say, I have to learn all of it, do you have to say, I have to learn all of it, or I have to know just what the bass does, or do I have to, know the words? Because you're singing too. I mean, that's like really like a lot to put on you guys. So how does it really work just from your side of the stage?
Well, for me, it was different because the whole band was coming together for the first time at the first show, and none of us had ever played together besides me and the drummer and the Dellacoma gig a few weeks before. But even he was a new person in my life. And so we didn't really know who was going to be singing where. And so, the whole time I'm thinking, okay, anywhere that sounds like there's multiple voices, I'm going to try to learn that part or learn what they're at least saying so I can be aware. But for me, it was more learn that part, but also learn the bass, just if I can just memorize the structure of the songs. It was also the first band that I had played in that played in drop D, which is a tuning for a lot of, heavier, darker sounding bands that it's a little bit of a different thing on the actual instrument. And I had no experience with that. So it was a learning curve there. And, also just the idea of like, okay, all I have to do to pretty much get my dream of being on tour is just learn these songs and get myself familiar and show up. Yeah, of course. And my buddy Chris Green that I played with in Dellacoma, he gave me some advice, and I've spoke about this many times. His advice to me was say yes to the opportunity and figure it out later. And I've tried to always keep that in mind, for the things that I do. But that's exactly what I ended up doing a few weeks later. I said yes to Tantric, and I thought, okay, I'm going to sleep with my headphones in. I'm going to tell all my friends on 4th of July weekend or whatever it was, I'm not coming out this weekend. I've got to do this. And I just stayed inside for 2 days and slept with headphones in and all the way to Seattle on the plane, just listened to the music until I went on stage that night, for the first show. And that's what it took, and that's what it takes. And some people say, oh, well, I wanted to watch this movie, or I wanted to go out for a beer or whatever. I know that when I want something, I'll do whatever it takes to get it. And that was, I think, my biggest opportunity in music as a whole. So I just wanted to seize it, and I think I did good enough to get through it.
Well, you impressed them, that's for sure. To continue on and not return to that business job is, that's validation right in itself. But, it's interesting when you say you went to Seattle. Were you the headliner band, or were you the whole band, or were there other bands there?
So the tour was us plus a direct support band that was on for the whole tour. And then they had some local bands on the bill as well, but it was a Tantric headline tour, smaller clubs and all sorts of places.
That's great. Yeah, out of all of the Tantric songs, I have my favorite. I love Astounded. So, what about you? Do you have anything that even now, you may not be currently in Tantric, or you may be in and out of all these other bands because you are very busy? Which one would you actually just flip on and say, it's coming over, my iPod right now or something, or it's coming over the airwaves? What would you like definitely keep on? Because I'm sure that you have your favorites.
My favorite Tantric stuff is from the second album, After We Go. And I think After We Go was always my favorite song to play in the set. Even, 6 years down the line, I just felt like that one for me, it was like the ultimate Tantric sound. It was heavy. It had the moody part. It kind of took you on a journey. And my all-time favorite Tantric song is Just Once. And we were lucky to, in the later years, get that one in the set list and be able to play that. And I learned that at first, I took the gig as an opportunity. I wasn't crazy about the band. But once I started to really dig into the songs and got past those first 14 that were required for the shows, we started to kind of dig into the catalog. I realized, well, there's a lot here that I really love and would come to love over time. And, it got fun to be in that position, to be able to pick the set list and to play songs that they didn't normally play, or to kind of do stuff, outside the regular, what I call a hit list. Most bands, when they tour, they do 13 or 14 songs, and it's the same ones every night, and every tour it's kind of the same thing. And I'm a big believer in doing different stuff and changing it every night and giving yourself a challenge. And Tantric has a lot of cool stuff to pick from, so it was a treat to be able to make that set list every night.
Yes, well, I have to say you are very lucky. They have a great fan base. They have very strong fan base, So whenever they go out to do a show, there's always people showing up for that. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that you were involved in Heaven's Edge. So I know that they're local to New Jersey. There's probably a lot you want to say about Heaven's Edge. So let's hear how you got involved with them.
Heaven's Edge came about in late 2019. Their original bassist, George Lynch, had passed away from cancer, tragically. And, Heaven's Edge had been a band that was on my radar and always kind of had been on my radar for quite a long time. I hadn't gotten service on my phone for like a couple days. And I realized, I better check in and get online somehow. And once I did, I got this message from Mark, the singer, who said pretty much, hey, we're looking to play the Monsters of Rock cruise. We have this offer, and we feel like Gigi would have wanted us to move on. What would you think about coming down and jamming with us to see, if maybe you'd be a good fit for the band? And at that point, Tantric was doing, I don't know, close to 200 shows a year. And so I thought, my schedule's a little crazy, but if I can fit it in, I'll definitely do it. And Heaven's Edge was definitely more up my alley, and musically and performing wise. And so I said yes. And the first audition or performance kind of just after the first song or two, we kind of just all looked at each other and knew it was going to be the right thing and the right fit. So I got very lucky with that, and was very fortunate to do my first show with them on the Monsters of Rock cruise, which was 2020, just before the pandemic. And what a great bunch of guys, and what an opportunity. They were always a Philly, New Jersey favorite, and guys that I had grown up going to see, and I knew what it meant to them to push forward with somebody else, besides their original lineup. So wanted to be sure that I honored the legacy and kind of just kept it all intact and make sure that the band could continue on. And I've had a total blast doing that.
Yeah, so Heaven's Edge, did you know their songs more than you did when you kind of entered Tantric? Or
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that probably made it an easier transition for you, That's kind of interesting. But to think that the first time out with these guys, you're on the Monsters of Rock, I mean, that alone, I know you're a professional, but I mean, that alone is like, wow, like that's my first venue with these guys. I mean, how cool is that?
Very cool. And it was also, at that point, probably the biggest thing I've been a part of. I mean, Monsters of Rock was always my number one event that I wanted to go to. I always just thought, oh man, like I could be on a boat with all my favorite bands, all the 80s bands, and just, what more do you need than water and sunshine? And and music. And yeah, I mean, to do it with a band and again, to be on it performing rather than just being a customer, I mean, or, a cruiser, it was electrifying. And going on stage with them, I was a little nervous just because I knew what it meant to them and I knew how important it was, but also I was ready to kick some ass for sure. And we we had a total blast on that.
That's great. I've been on a couple of cruises, but not with music. It's always on my bucket list, but I haven't been able to do it. You think about how many people and how many bands, and a lot of people are having a vacation, right? So, was there anyone there that really struggled with like seasickness? Because it's not just people out drinking. I mean, there are people that really can't tolerate being on the seas. So, did you find that with any of the bands or anybody in particular? Or?
I didn't see any of that really going down. I think my first year on the cruise, I was a little starstruck just at everything, just the whole event in general. I was that typical tourist, if you will. So if there was a lot of that, I didn't really see it or maybe pay attention to it. And even after all these years, I've done about 4 or 5 of them now, and I don't really see much of that. I think if you have any doubt about being seasick, most people are hesitant to even get on a cruise in general, let alone something where they know they're going to be drinking or going crazy or, having a lot of fun, which, all those things apply with the Monster Rock cruise. So you'd be surprised, it's not a lot of people getting sick. It's no fights. It's no drama. It's just all love and exciting energy. So yeah, it's a pretty safe and healthy environment for the most part.
Wow, well, I'll keep it on my list then. But
Oh
it's
yeah.
funny because sometimes weather takes, being out on a cruise ship, you can get into a weather pattern, and it doesn't matter if you've never been seasick, everyone is seasick.
Sure. Oh yeah.
So you're lucky you didn't come into any of those things. So that's great. So after doing that, I know in your bio it had said something about you teaming up with Stone Sours, Josh Rand, and the Life Project. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the Life Project is essentially a group that was formed with Josh Rand and Cassandra Carson, my girlfriend. She fronts a band called Paralandra. And actually, being out with Heaven's Edge, our drummer Dave Rath, he's very involved in the music record industry, and was saying, "Hey, I have a client that is interested in a female singer. Would your girlfriend be interested in maybe working with somebody on a project?" And I said, you know, uh, "Let me ask." And I talked to her, and she's like, I'm not really interested in doing anything else besides my band, but I kind of was like, it just could be good, an experience. You never know. I always say yes, figure it out later. And so we said okay, and the email came through, and I saw in the email that it was Josh Rand. I'm like, dude, you should do this. Like this is a great opportunity, and you're working with somebody with a name, and you never know what could come from it. So after her agreeing to do it and putting out some music, the Life Project kind of was faced with this. Okay, you've been around for a little while, you have a couple releases out, but when it comes to touring, what's going to happen? And they started to put a band together, a touring lineup, and asked me to be the bass player. And that's kind of my involvement for the most extent early on. It was okay, we're going to do a couple shows, we're going to do this tour, and everything moving forward, they wanted to then make it a band. So it's something that we all kind of do outside of our main gigs, and it's been dormant for the last year or so. We did a large tour with Alice in Chains and Breaking Benjamin and Bush in the fall of 22. And that was right around the same time I teamed up with George, and at the same time when Tantric had one of their biggest tours and also a bunch of Heaven's Edge stuff going on. So it was really stressful and hard to juggle, but we made that happen. And that was a life-changing tour. I got a taste of some of the biggest venues around the country, and another, learning experience and a step up in some ways. And yeah, I mean, the band is still intact. It's been kind of quiet recently, but we have an album that's almost done and ready to go. And again, it's something that we all kind of do outside of our normal gigs, and everybody knows that. So a labor of love, if you will.
That's really terrific. When did you get involved with doing work with George Lynch? Because it sounds like that was colliding with your other projects right around that same time.
It was. I got asked to fill in for 4 shows in the summer of 22. He was going under George Lynch and the Electric Freedom at that time, and they were going through some member changes. And the current bass player at that time was Rob DeLuca, and he was going back out with UFO. So yeah, they asked, can you fill in these dates? And I had knew a few of the guys, and John Thayer, George's tour manager and tech, he had worked with Tantric in the past as well, so I knew him, and it just it seemed seamless. And we did those shows, and there was a few more lineup changes and such, and kind of just turned into, we're going to do Lynch Mob again, and would you want to be part of the band if we made it a band thing, and all these exciting new things that were going on for him at the time. And of course, George has always been my number one guy, in rock. So, and music, I've always been very aware of the things that he does, all the different projects. And I've always admired his work ethic. Kind of one of those things that we spoke about earlier, where you dream of things, but maybe in the wrong context. And I always dreamed when I was younger, I would love to open the show for George Lynch, or, play with Dokken or Lynch Mob or whoever. And yeah, I think it was like 2015. We got to do that in Philly in Dobbs with Mach 22. And I just thought, how cool is that? I got to play with my friggin' heroes and share the stage. And Jakey Lee was another guy like that. I'm like, man, it doesn't get any better than this. And then all those years later, I'm on stage playing with the guy. And I just didn't think it was going to really be any more than filling in a few shows. And honestly, that was going to be enough for me. I couldn't even imagine that, back in the day. So going from that and filling in to becoming a member of the band, and then this being, years later now, and we've had a steady lineup and we're having a lot of fun. It's just, again, one of those things you dream of being somebody viewing this, not, being a part of it. So it's just was crazy, as a fan and as a musician, to merge them together. It's just been really wild.
Yes, well, you have quite the chemistry with George Lynch on stage, and his career alone is something that people admired for many, many years, and even seeing him now, current day. I talked about this in my second book, but Dokken actually came back to the Chance in 2021. The Chance went through a lot of changes. The owners of the Chance passed away, and so he came out and did a song, played with Dokken, and the crowd went wild. And we had just come off of the big wave of COVID, and people were looking around. We had never seen the Chance literally filled to the walls of people. And I talked about that in the book because it was the last show that Frank Pallette had actually booked before he passed away. So it was like a really iconic, situation to have happen. And just Dokken for all of us. I mean, Dokken was just, part of it was a staple in our music, and just to see that. So, you're really super lucky. I mean, I've said you're lucky. I think if I've had $1 in this interview, you are really lucky. And, honestly, I wrote it on social media when I promoted you, but your future is ultra bright. It really, really is. And, you say like so casually, well, I'm just playing with George Lynch. Like, oh my gosh, you must go to bed some nights just thinking like, is this really happening? Do you have any situations that you like, sometimes you finish a show or you finish something and you say, did that really just happen? Like, you have to say this is almost unbelievable, right?
I mean, yeah, to an extent, honestly, yes, I consider myself lucky, but, I also work really hard to put myself in maybe situations that maybe where the luck makes it a little easier, for sure. But the big thing for me is like, once I get there, or once I become a part of these things, it's really stuff that I try not to like let it get to my head like that. Yes, do it pinch me. I'm lucky. Absolutely. Yes. Do I think I can't believe that just happened? But more so in my head, I'm going to bed. I'm like, oh man, I almost hit a wrong note. I don't want George to know I missed that part. Or, I'm like, in my brain the next day, I'm like, I got to do better. I got to make sure I can hang with these guys. And I'm always pushing to be better than I've ever been, which is it possible? I don't know, but I'm always going to be trying, because going on stage with George is a different experience than going on stage with a band like Tantric, or any band that would play, let's say, they want to play all their hits and have a good light show and a bunch of cool effects and all these things. That's all great. I find that to be kind of like going through the motions and the muscle memory and giving the best presentation of songs that people want to connect with. With George, it's almost like sports. It's four guys that are, at the top of their game or wanting to be and going out on stage every night based on how they feel that day. And the performance every night is different. The set list every night is different. It's all about that moment and what we can pull off in that moment. Not so much how good can we play these songs, but how will we play these songs tonight? And that as a musician is the most rewarding and exciting thing that I've been a part of or achieved. With Tantric, it was cool to have a song on the radio and for it to do well or to be up there playing for a lot of people that are singing your songs. It's another thing to be on stage standing next to George and you can see it in his face or in his hands when he's having just a moment of magic, or Gabriel up there just hitting a high note that you could just, think no one can hit that note, or why, he hits it with ease and it just shakes your soul, or Jimmy's just back there pounding, and just every night it's like one guy could have their best show ever and the other guys could have a horrible show, or vice versa. You never know. And it's like preparing for battle. And that's very much how I look at it. And, knowing that this is his final tour or his last ride, every night, that's all I'm worried about. I try to close everything else out and worry about going into battle with George and the guys. And it's been a lot of fun and humbling for sure.
So you have a lot of shows coming up, and I know they say this is his last ride. I can't imagine him stopping, though. He's an amazing guy, and you said it correctly. I mean, especially standing in the audience and looking at him, he so much so goes into his own world when he's playing, and you can actually see him almost like become part of the instrument he's playing. And there's like no one else in the room. It's just him and the guitar, kind of a thing going on. So I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate something you said earlier, because I was an instructor in the military for many years, and very rarely do you hear it, but I heard it with you. And it's how you critique yourself. And that I appreciate, because we are our own worst critic, but we also know, that we know how to do something. And, someone may not have even heard it. Maybe someone may not even have seen it, but we saw it. So we can easily beat ourselves up over things like that. So, you're an amazing person. But I also think having those moments with yourself just make you that much stronger, and that much more realistic to, okay, I am human, we're all human one day, but being, connected with someone like, George. I mean, I remember briefing like a high-ranking general and I was like shaking. So I get it. It's not the same, but it feels the same.
Many elements of the same there for sure. A high-ranking general. That's how I see George.
That's great. So tell me about the coming dates. I know that, we had talked the other night. You have some dates coming up. So roll those out. Let me know what that's about.
So yes, it's the final ride. It's pretty much a tour that's going to go into March of next year. It's going to conclude on the Monsters of Rock Cruise 25. At least that's the plan as of now and has been. George, he's going to be 70 years old this year. He's got a life outside of music, and I'm sure he wants to spend time with family and do the things that are important to him, outside of just slaving away on the guitar. And that's the idea. We've been grinding as a band now for a couple of years, and he's been grinding 40 plus years, so at some point he's asking himself, do I want to still do all this that it takes to have a band and to keep it all going, or do I just want to do what I want in life and I'll maybe play a little guitar here and there, and whatever his reasons are, I'm sure these are all things that cross his mind. But kind of like you said, when you see him become one with guitar, I mean, when I see that on a nightly basis or most nights, it makes you wonder, is this guy gonna be able to stop? And maybe we can keep him going a little longer, or maybe we just do it less. I'm not really sure, but when I look at him as a fan, and when I look at him, as a partner on stage, I don't see how he could stop. I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing to see and feel, but also kind of sad when you think about it. There's a lot of fans out there that I'm sure can relate, and to lose a guy like George, as something to go see and to be entertained by is sad, because you get a lot of these bands these days, the ones from the heyday that it's either no original members or people have passed on or don't play. And it's just like, when you got a legend and a guy like that, the world needs it. And I think in this day and age with music, the world needs a guy like George and needs these older guys to keep doing it for as long as they feel like, they feel something with it, because a lot of people feel something from witnessing what they do and listening. So, it's my church, I need to go to church. I need to hear George play. I need to be able to go see bands I love. And as they get older, that gets harder. And hopefully that's a sign of what young guys like myself, getting involved with some of this stuff means. I hope that means that it's a way of passing on the torch and carrying on and keeping these legacies alive and this style of music alive. But yeah, we're going to be giving it all we got all the way to the end. And that's going to be everything from Northeast to California to Florida. We did Australia back in February. Hopefully we can get overseas and do some more stuff in some other countries. But the schedule is ever changing and it's always being filled. We kind of are doing it like 3-4 months at a time. Yes, we have dates all the way through next year, but the stuff that we're posting now, we're posting little by little because things are still being added and subtracted, from the schedule accordingly. Not everything's permanent. So it's really just a juggling of the schedule and fitting as much in as we can before the end date. And then I guess once the end date comes or it gets nearer, we'll reassess and see what we're going to do. But it's already set in stone for the most part.
Wow. Well, this interview has been a pleasure, not just for me, but for everyone in the audience. We will be looking for you on stage with George Lynch and everything else that you've been involved in. We're going to end the show with a song from Lynch Mob. It's actually from their latest album, which is Babylon. And you have selected the song Erase. So I just want to say thank you again, Jaron. You have been a pleasure. You're an amazing person with an ultra bright future. Thank you again, Jaron.
Thanks, Kathy.